This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on cabinet decisions. The participants are A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Shishir Sinha, journalist.
Mr. Bhattacharya, let me begin with the national logistic policy which was announced by the Prime Minister. And today, the Cabinet has approved this policy. Aim is to bring down to the single digit by 2030. What does it mean for the industry and what does it mean for the consumer?
The national logistics policy, as you know, is going to work in tandem with the Gati Shakti policy. And the current logistics cost in the economy for undertaking any economic activity is stated to be around 12% of GDP. Now, this is considered to be very high. And if we want to achieve our goals of being a developed economy in the next couple of decades, then we need to bring that cost down to speed up our pace of economic activity with greater efficiency. The global target is around 8% of GDP is the cost of logistics. So I would imagine that to bring it down from 12% to 8% of GDP, this national logistics policy will help us to reach those global benchmarks. The second important point in brief is that the logistics performance index, we are now at around number 35. And the goal in the national logistics policy is to take us up to the rank of 25 among the top 25 countries. So I think these are the two major goals that the national logistics policy hopes to achieve.
When we talk about logistic cost, the first and most important thing which comes in our mind is that taking the input to the factory and taking the output to the market. So from a consumer point of view, what should he understand when we say that the cost of logistics has come down from 12% to 8%?
What it means exactly is the quality and the cost of services and goods should see corresponding decrease or decline, and the quality should improve. Because what happens in a large country like India, if something is produced in one corner of the country and when it reaches the other part of the country, if that transportation is completed with little adverse impact on the quality of that goods and the cost of transporting that goods is the least minimum, using the various digital technology and also using a transportation network that are cheaper than the current fossil fuel-based transportation. For example, under the national logistics policy, there has to be and there will be greater emphasis on inland waterway transportation that brings down the cost of supplying, which, if you look at it, it will be complementing the Gati Shakti plan, which is the national master plan for infrastructure, because that also has goal of developing the inland waterways transportation along with the coastal shipping network. So the national logistics policy will help us bring down the cost of this transportation, and therefore for the common consumer, the cost and the price of those goods and services should come down over a period of time.
One of the critical stakeholder in the national logistics policy is the state. And if we understand correctly, 14 states have already a state-level logistic policy, while 13 have finalized their draft. So what kind of cooperation more and more needed from the states to make the national logistic policy a successful one?
In my view, the joining the national logistics policy or the framework is actually a win-win for both the states and the center. The 13 states whose participation in the national logistics policy is still in a draft stage, my reading is that it is a bit like the state VAT system when initially one state joined in 2003, that was Haryana, but soon after, by 2005, almost all states had joined in because they saw the revenues went up. Similarly, my reading is that joining the national logistics policy will actually be a win-win for both the idea as well as the consumers and the residents of those states, because there the good supply and the cost of services will come down, and those states will also benefit in terms of higher revenues, because as you know, GST is a destination-based tax system. So more goods are consumed in those states which are part of the state logistic policies, then naturally the state revenue should also see an improvement.
Now coming to the second decision which was approved by Union Cabinet, and that was second phase of National Program on High Efficiency Solar PV Modules. If we understand correctly, by 2030 we have a target of achieving 500 gigawatt of renewable energy, and out of those 500 gigawatt, 280 gigawatts from the solar energy. So what kind of role you see of this decision making in achieving that target?
I think you're referring to the production linked incentive scheme and for the national program on high efficiency solar PV modules. As the cabinet discussed, they looked at an outlay of around 19,500 crore for creating these manufacturing capacities in high efficiency solar PV modules. Now, this will be a big boost to the country's renewable energy program. As you would know that because of the various climate change commitments, climate adaptation and climate mitigation commitments the government has made, not only within the country but also in international forums, we need to create more supplies of these solar photovoltaics, which in a very competitive and efficient way, so that our capacity to set up and supply more solar power increases. As I understand, the expectation is that about 65,000 megawatt per annum of manufacturing capacity with integrated solar photovoltaic modules is the target. If this 19,500 crore of production linked incentive scheme can encourage solar photovoltaic sector to set up capacity to produce them. As you know, the solar photovoltaic, the globally area where there are a lot of protectionism is there, a lot of companies which want to produce them going for dumping. So the trade in this area is not a free trade oriented system. So we need to build our own capacity in solar photovoltaics. And if the production linked incentive scheme can encourage more companies to undertake these activities, then India's larger goal of creating more solar capacity and renewable energy will be helping. And remember that this will also bring in an estimated about 1 lakh crore or 94,000 crore of investments in this area, which will be an additional gain because more there is the investment, it has got a lot of positive chain effects in terms of demand and growth and the economic output.
And also to add to that, we are expecting direct job creation of 2 lakh and indirect job creation of 8 lakh. That's a very high number. At the same time, in this revised policy, one thing which has been added that it will be available not just for the greenfield project, but also for the brownfield project. So how this is going to help the companies which are already in business, and at the same time, we also need to cut down our import, and at the end of the day, we need to become an exporter.
You are very right. Now that it has been extended to the brownfield projects as well, what this will mean is that there are many existing projects which are currently finding the manufacture of these solar photovoltaic cells not very remunerative. They will be able to turn the corner, so to say, and will be able to produce them at a price that they get their adequate return on their investments. So that is the positive for the brownfield projects. Also remember the country benefits, because if the brownfield projects actually start manufacturing them with this incentive and they get their returns adequately, then the country's import substitution program is also, that goal is also enhanced. As you know that this production linked incentive scheme is also aimed at ensuring an import substitution to the tune of almost 1.37 lakh crore over a period of this policy.
And also, if I add two more things here, that all the brownfield projects, they will get 50% of the incentive, and then that incentive will be paid over a period of 5 years, and they will get the maximum incentive, just like the greenfield one in the first year. Coming to the third major decision, which is related with the semiconductor and display manufacturing ecosystem, some modifications have been made. And the government is saying that we need to become a kind of self-dependent, or what we call as the Atmanirbhar in this particular phase. How these modifications are going to help?
Well, this is a very ambitious project that semiconductor fabrication facilities, manufacturing of them, these things are critical because the manner in which the chips increasingly being used in all kinds of products and applications, we cannot be continuously be dependent on just on imports. And as you also know that there are very few countries who produce them. As a matter of fact, Taiwan has the largest share in the global market. So we need to build domestic capacity in this area. Right now, what we are talking about is of a certain type of chips. We are not into the nano chip category as yet, but nevertheless, a beginning has to be made. This is a high cost, capital intensive project. It requires huge supply of water. It requires uninterrupted supply of electricity. So what the government has done is providing very generous fiscal support to this program for developing semiconductors and display manufacturing ecosystem in the country. They're providing fiscal support of around 50% of the project cost. They're providing 50% fiscal support for capital expenditure for setting up variety of semiconductors and fabrication facilities, including silicon photonics and sensor fabrication units. So I think what this will mean is that we will be able to meet some of our requirements, these semiconductors and chips, through domestic supply. But it does not happen in a hurry. It will not immediately be manufactured. It's a long-term project, but it's a good beginning. We need, for strategic reasons, to start creating domestic capacity because we do have the design capacity, but we don't have the manufacturing capacity. And that is what is intended to be achieved through this policy step.
And I think three major changes have been brought in this policy. One is about earlier the financing for different kind of windows was between 30% to 50%. Now it is uniform 50%. The second one, which is also very, very critical, that is less than 45 nm. That measurement has been changed. So any kind of semiconductor thing can be produced here. And the third one, which is also very, very important, that capping of 12,000 crore rupees of investment, that has been lifted. So when we are talking about there is no capping, that means anyone who is coming with a big investment can take advantage of this policy. How this is going to help the overall scenario?
Well, any removal of cap is going to be good news for this sector. But we are talking about 45 nanometer technology here, the chips. But the world has real high-grade applications are in a much lower category, smaller chips, even to the extent of 3.5 nm. So as I said, that this policy is going to encourage chip making for use in automotive sectors or in other transportation sector. But the larger needs, the sectoral needs, we will see how soon and how quickly can we build those capacity in the days to come. But as I said, this is a good beginning, but the challenges are going to be huge and the task will be ambitious.
And when we say that more and more countries are attracting companies, because we know that very few companies are into the chip manufacturing, and the companies which are in the chip manufacturing are the larger ones. All the countries are trying to get more and more these companies on the board. Will India be able to do so just by removing the cap, or do it needs to do something more?
We need to create an ecosystem within the country by which these facilities can be created. As I said, three important critical inputs for setting up a successful semiconductor fabrication facility. Number one, it must a large area of land which should be available in a dedicated way. Number two would be uninterrupted supply of electricity, where the quality of electricity has to be of a high grade. And number three will be the availability of water. So therefore, there has to be greater coordination between the states as well as the center if you want to make semiconductor policy succeed. And since these are our basic requirement of any project, I don't see any hurdle, but adequate attention has to be paid to these requirements. And the fourth element is the availability of design engineers. And that India has in good numbers. So I don't see the problem there. But I think we need greater coordination to make sure that land, electricity, and water are available in plenty to make a success of these semiconductor facilities to be set up under the new policy.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya, for talking to us.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on cabinet decisions. The participants were A.K. Bhattacharya, economic analyst, and Shishir Sinha, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.